Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Nonfiction Kidlit Craft Conversations podcast, where we take a deep dive into the craft and business of writing true stories for kids. Today, I'm particularly excited to talk to Emily Starr, founder of Starrmatica, a company dedicated to helping teachers bring science to life with engaging, inquiry based resources. Emily has years of experience working at the intersection of education and STEM, and she's here to share what's really happening in today's elementary science classrooms and how authors can play a role in inspiring the next generation of scientists, engineers, and curious thinkers. I should also mention that Emily and her work have been particularly helpful and influential for me as I promote my latest book, This Is How You Know, How Science Happens, illustrated by Cornelia Lee. You can buy it now wherever you get your books. And Emily has really helped me think through the messages about science that I'm sharing with kids, parents, and educators as I share the book. She's really just so smart about all of this. So, welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you. You are very kind. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited to have you. So, first, I shared a little bit about you, but tell us a little bit about yourself and Starrmatica and what you do
Mhm.
to support science learning in elementary classrooms.
Sure. So I like to say that I help educators become rock star science teachers. I was a fourth grade teacher, and I made the shift from teaching students to teaching teachers about 2 decades ago when I started Starrmatica. So I help teachers in two main ways. First, through science curriculum products. So, most interesting to your listeners would probably be the 700 nonfiction picture book guides that I've created to
Wow.
help teachers integrate science and reading. So, if you need comps, I'm your gal. And the second way I help is with professional development. That shares how to teach science in a way that keeps a child's curiosity fire burning. So, I offer a variety of online and in person classes for individual schools, districts, and I do some PD statewide here in Iowa as a member of the Iowa State Science Leadership Team.
Awesome. She's a very busy lady, as you can tell. So let's set the stage a little bit. You and I had a little email exchange a couple of weeks ago. There has been some recent data that's showing that kids' knowledge of science, or at least how they're testing with regards to their science knowledge, is slipping a little bit in the US. So, can you give us a little bit of information about what's going on with science learning in US classrooms and what are some reasons that might be
Mhm.
behind this trend?
Sure. So, yeah, we emailed back and forth and talked about the new NAEP science test that comes out. It's a test that's given every 4 years in reading, math, and science. It's a test that I gave to my students when I was in the classroom. And on this 2024 test, less than a third of students scored as what they say is proficient in science. It was a slight dip. But when I started looking at the data, as awful as that sounds, I was even more concerned about the accompanying survey because that showed that only 42% of students said that they enjoy science activities. That was down 10%. And only 33% said that they look forward to science class. So that tracks with other research I've been reading that shows that a child's interest in science actually decreases the further they go in school. So, as educators, we are squashing their natural curiosity. And that just breaks my heart because there's been a lot of science education research, and we know how to make science interesting and engaging. In my opinion, it should be the favorite part of a child's day. I mean, I think we can even compete with lunch and recess, if I'm being honest.
I love it. Well, in some of one of the sessions that I've taken with you previously that was geared towards writers and
Mhm.
helping us understand elementary science, you showed us and shared with us some data that shows why elementary science is so critical and why we really need to maintain that interest
Mhm.
early before kids hit middle school and high school. Why is it so important for kids to be excited about science in elementary?
Yeah, this is something that I share with anyone who will listen because it's really what fuels me because I have two kids that are 8 and 10. So it really hits home. So there are three main reasons that elementary science is so important. The first one comes from a bunch of research studies. The one that always sticks in my mind is called Eyeballs in the Fridge because that's such a weird study title. But these studies show that by eighth grade, nearly half of students are no longer interested in science. And that's not just that kids aren't going to go on and have STEM careers. It's that they're not going to have science hobbies and that they just disengage as adults from science. And then the second reason elementaries is so important is because that spark of curiosity is either ignited or put out in elementary. So other studies have shown that adults who have science related hobbies and who really engage with science, that started in elementary school. And then the third reason that really is rarely discussed is that children are learning about the world with or without us. Like you model in your book, this is how you know kids are curious explorers and they need an adult to guide them because kids develop misconceptions. Like kids believe the sun revolves around the earth because that's their lived experience. You know, they see the sun moving across the sky. And research shows that once they get those misconceptions, they are incredibly hard to change. Like they are weeds that just keep popping back up. And I use the example because it just blows my mind. Here's proof. According to a 2010 National Science Foundation survey, 26% of Americans don't know that the Earth orbits around the sun. So
Oh,
those
wow.
misconceptions just stick, and it's easier to start kids off right.
Well, as a side note, my husband is a pilot. He used to fly for the military. Now he works for
Uh-huh.
NASA, and they encounter a lot of people who think that the earth is flat. Even though my husband has flown high enough that he has seen the
Yeah.
curvature of the earth.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah,
It's
it's interesting.
interesting.
So one thing I know that was really surprising to me when I've gone to some of your sessions before is science classrooms today are very different from what I grew up with and what I remember from science
Mhm.
education.
Mhm.
So, can you share a little bit about what a science elementary classroom looks like today and how much time are kids and teachers able to spend on science compared to other subjects like reading and math?
Sure. So I'll start with the time factor because that's a big deal. Reading and math definitely dominate in elementary. And some schools, they've got over 2 hours of reading instruction per day. They've done studies. The national average for science is 20 minutes per day, but that's really deceiving because a lot of schools rotate science and social studies. So it's inconsistent in kids' lives. And if they run out of time at the end of the day, that's where science usually is, then it gets cut. So there are very few schools that have science daily. I think it's also important to point out that science and social studies are inextricably linked to reading comprehension. And that's a message that I'm really trying to spread because research shows that because we've pushed aside science and social studies, we have hurt our reading comprehension skills because kids don't have the background knowledge to understand what they're reading. So it's counterintuitive, but in order to improve reading comprehension, we've got to spend more time with science and social studies.
Well, and that
Um,
probably also for a lot of kids, that's also maybe ignites curiosity too. I mean, there are kids who like fiction, but then there are kids who like true information as their preferred form of reading. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I have one of those kids. And my youngest, he's nonfiction all the way. He always has been. So,
Right. Yeah, hooray for those readers. But
yeah.
anyway, yeah. Yeah, so we were going to talk about if we get to have some time during the school day for elementary science, how is the approach to elementary science today different from what a lot of us probably grew up with?
Sure. So, as far as what science typically looks like, if you were to walk into any classroom today, it's honestly all over the place. So, you have teachers who are still teaching the way we were taught, who are engaging in, I like to call them, ooh, that's cool activities like baking soda volcanoes, but they're not connected to figuring anything out. There's video-based science curriculums that use cookbook type experiments that spell out for the kids step by step what they're supposed to do. And then you do have some teachers on the other end of the spectrum, which is where we want to move, who are engaging their students in figuring out how and why questions. So we want kids investigating, how is this tree growing out of the middle of this rock? Or why are some surfaces on the playground warmer than others? So we want to make that shift from fact-based learning to figuring things out. And the reason I share that it's all over the map is because when authors attend my webinars about elementary instruction, I always share that just because now the authors have this new knowledge about what good in science instruction is, doesn't mean that the teachers that they work with will.
Right. True, true. Some of the shift has come as a result of or at the same time as the next generation science standards. So, how are these new science standards shaping what teachers are teaching and how they're teaching it?
Sure. So teachers have to follow the standards in their state. The NGSS Next Generation Science Standards were released in 2012. They've been adopted in 20 states and the District of Columbia, and then versions of the standards are adopted by all the other states except Florida. And so the standards dictate to teachers the content they're required to teach at their grade level. So as a fourth grade teacher, I couldn't teach a unit in Iowa that helps kids figure out why the moon has phases because that's a first grade standard.
Mm.
And the NGSS are very intentional about what they call coherence across grade levels, which just means learning builds over time. Like there's a specific sequence. And as I talked about a little bit earlier, the biggest shift with the NGSS was from knowing about things to figuring it out. So something that we used to have in classrooms a lot is stuffing kids full of science facts, having them memorize like science is the set of facts, but it's really detrimental because number one, it turns kids off to science. It makes them think that it's just the static collection. And we need to be guiding them to notice and wonder about phenomena. So that's a word that's used a lot with the NGSS, and it just means things in the natural world. So we want our kids figuring out how or why something is happening. That shift has taken a long time. You think about the standards came out in 2013 and we're here, 2025, and there are a lot of our classrooms that aren't teaching in that way, but that's because reading and math is the focus for teacher professional development as well. So science PD hasn't been a priority, and I hope it will be in the near future.
Yeah, and so one way that I think about the shift is kind of like you said, we've gone from science as here is a set of facts or here is a recipe that you follow
Mhm.
to actually encouraging kids to be scientists and to use the same
Yes.
practices, to follow the same types of thinking about the world as scientists. So the shift is kind of the way I think about it, from learning science to kids doing science, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
And so we've talked about some of the challenges, time being one, the fact that some teachers still, may not be using the next generation science standards or their state's version. So, what are some of the other challenges that teachers are facing when they're trying to bring science into the classroom?
Yeah, there are a number. I think the number one that I see in my work with the Iowa State Science Leadership Team is administrator oversight. There is a lot that goes on in elementary classrooms, especially in large districts, that is dictated by the district. Some curriculums are very regimented. You must teach this lesson on this specific day, spend this number of minutes on this subject, and they don't have a lot of flexibility. The other thing is that teachers don't know what they don't know about science. If they haven't had some PD or been exposed to different ways of teaching, they don't know. Even a lot of schools try and improve science by bringing in a new curriculum. But if you train on just how to use the curriculum itself and you don't help teachers to understand how to teach science differently and why we're teaching science differently, then they take that curriculum and teach it in the way that they used to. So, we really have to help teachers on how to teach science differently. The good news is that teachers do have discretionary time, and picture books are the perfect medium to fit into those cracks and spaces. So I always tell teachers to start your day off right with a read aloud. When the kids are coming in hot from recess, have them sit down, chill out with a read aloud, have kids listen to a read aloud during center time. So they do have some of those transitional moments. And I always tell teachers just sprinkle picture book reading throughout your entire day, especially nonfiction, because then you're bringing some of those scientific thinking and conversations into your entire day, not just at science time.
Oh, that's such a great tip. I love that. I love that. Well, and a lot of our listeners are nonfiction authors, many of whom write STEM books. So, as you mentioned, you have this catalog of
I
hundreds
do.
of picture books. So, obviously, you've done a lot of thinking about what makes a good STEM picture book that's helpful to teachers. So, what are some of your thoughts about how we can make our books more helpful to teachers, or what are some elements we should think about including?
Sure. So this is so hard because I love them all. I want them all. I want to share them all. There are so many wonderful STEM books. Um, but just a few examples. So when I teach teachers how to integrate STEM books into their classrooms, there are a couple of strategies I recommend. So one is using biographies to model the science and engineering practices. So those are the things that we want kids doing, like asking questions and conducting investigations. So, for example, in The Fire of Stars, your book,
Thank you.
recommend that teachers use it to model the practice of questioning because it really shows how questioning is used in real life by scientists. So, another feature of STEM books that's helpful for teachers is when data is included in the discussions or illustrations. Kids need lots of practice analyzing and interpreting data. It's one of the cores of scientific work. So, here's another example in The Mystery of the Monarchs by Barb Rosenstock. She has threaded throughout this story how they analyzed and interpreted data to figure out the location of the monarchs overwintering home in Mexico. She has a map in here that students can analyze. Another example, Magic in a Drop of Water by my
Oh,
friend Julie Winterbaum. She paints a beautiful picture of data collecting and has an illustration that shows a bar graph. So that's really wonderful. But your picture book might not be one that lends itself to having data in the picture book. It still can be helpful to include in your curriculum guide ways that teachers can connect data to your book, because picture books can help teachers tie data collecting to a purpose. So there's a reason that we're collecting data. So an example of that is when I have a data class that I do with teachers, I have them analyze roadkill data from Colorado and look at some of the trends and what animals are meeting that fate and where that's happening. And I now am gratefully on the Colorado email list to get the quarterly roadkill updates. So that's really fun to look through. um, but I have teachers and then have their students look through this roadkill data before you read something like Crossings,
oh, wow. Yes.
by Katie Duffield, or in a similar Make Way for Animals by Meg Pincus,
Hmm.
because then kids have a reason for why we are doing these wildlife bridges and a background for it.
Oh, that's so cool.
I guess lastly, I also always show teachers the back matter. They don't always know that that's there, and back matter matters. So I think rich back matter always helps educators to illustrate, the research process, and it gives them a springboard for what they can do beyond the book.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's kind of like multiple layers. You have the main text, you have
Mhm.
any text features that are part of the book, the back matter, and then you can do even more in the curriculum guide. So we have all
Mhm.
these different layers we can work with.
Yes.
So, how can we as authors design books that go beyond just delivering facts and instead stimulate curiosity and inquiry? Or I should say nurture, because kids are naturally curious until we snuff it out, as you've stated. How do we as authors nurture that curiosity and inquiry?
Sure. So let me start by saying There's nothing wrong with books that deliver facts. There is a place for those, especially when they're delivered in a creative way. But maybe if we look at this from the perspective of how I show teachers different ways to use the books in the classroom, and then authors can see how their books might fit into this structure. So I teach teachers that there are 3 categories of STEM books based on when you should read them during your lesson. So you don't want to read a fact-heavy book at the beginning of the lesson because you're giving it all away. Like, there's nothing left then for the kids to figure out. So, for example, if we're trying to figure out why certain animals live in certain places, I don't want to open with a nonfiction book all about habitats that shares what animals live in different habitats and why, because it steals the aha from the kids. So, as an alternative, beginning books, I encourage teachers to read books that might be fiction or might be informational fiction. So, you could open your unit with Except Antarctica
Oh,
by Todd Sturgill, which it's funny because it gets kids thinking about why turtles and owls don't live in Antarctica, but it doesn't spell it out for them. It just gets them thinking and curious. And then as you move on into the information gathering portion of the lesson, then you can break out your big, beautiful, browsable DK books, and have them learn all about habitats.
oh, that's great.
So then at the end of the lesson, I encourage teachers to read books that take kids beyond the standard to some real world implications. So, for example, in the habitats unit, if we want to start talking about how humans impact ecosystems, you could read Lights Out by Jessica Strummer. And teachers can tie back to their community. So I live in the Midwest, not that far from Chicago. And I just read an article about a terrible bird strike they had in 2023 that killed like 1,000 birds. And teachers can take what the kids read in the picture book and then find something to make that local connection that's relevant to the students' lives.
So I like that. So it's sort of like we're either piquing interest, like piquing curiosity and wonder might be a purpose
Mhm.
of the book. Obviously, there are those great browsable books, DK, Eyewitness. My kids loved all of those,
Mhm.
right? Just to get more facts. And then there's sort of a whole different subset of STEM books, which to me almost answer the question, why does this matter? Why should
Matter.
we care about it? So that's really cool that
Absolutely.
we can write books that can slot into all 3 of those areas.
Mhm.
That's great. So, can you share an example of a children's STEM book that obviously you've given us a couple of different options, but what are some other STEM books that do some of these things very well and really stand out in a classroom context?
So this is really hard. So I have 2. I am obsessed with Polly Owen's Darwin's
Oh,
Super Pooping Worm Spectacular. Because basically the book fact could be summed up as worm poop is excellent fertilizer. Yet she shows that process of discovery in an entertaining way. There are a couple of things I think make it work so well. First of all, it's funny. Secondly, it shows someone acting on their curiosity. It shows failure. It shows perseverance in the face of ridicule. So there are a lot of things for teachers to emphasize in that one. My second that I usually gift to teachers at the beginning of the year is What's in Your Pocket by Heather Montgomery, because that showcases natural curiosity as well. I first read it when my boys were little and were constantly coming in with pockets full of rocks and like containers full of frogs. And I felt very seen. But it read to me like a celebration of childhood, and it shows why it's important for children to have experiences in nature because you never know where that might lead.
Oh, I love that book too. And in fact, my kids still, I periodically I'll be cleaning out a bag and I'm like, where did these rocks come from? And why are you hauling them around? Isn't that
Yes.
heavy? My gosh, so funny. So, what advice would you give an author who wants to align their work more closely with what should ideally be happening in schools without making their book feel like the textbooks we're trying to avoid?
Mhm. So I think the first step is getting really familiar with the NGSS. And I know that can seem really daunting. It's really daunting for educators too. I am planning a series of webinars in January because I know this is an issue in conjunction with StoryStorm, where I am going to take a grade level per night and walk you through each one of the standards. They're actually called performance expectations, but we can dive into, okay, we'll take a performance expectation. Here's what it means. Here's some picture books that are examples of this. And my goal is to help authors to figure out what performance expectations align to their current manuscripts and books, but then also to spark new ideas where there are gaps in the market, because I've gone through and done the aligning of books to each of the PEs, and there are gaps. There are places where I couldn't find many books. So keep an eye out for that. So get to know the NGSS. And then I think close alignment to the classroom really comes in the curriculum guide. You can show teachers how this book fits into their instruction. I had no problem aligning 700 nonfiction picture books to what's going on in the classroom. At the end of the day, we don't want our books, like you said, to be didactic. You need to write the story that you're meant to write. And I think we do a really good job as nonfiction authors finding innovative structures and using lyrical language to make that science come alive.
Well, and you've shown us how a variety of different storytelling techniques can be used. Except Antarctica is humorous, right?
Mhm.
It's technically informational fiction because it's I think it's technically
Yeah, I think
informational
so.
fiction. Right? So informational fiction, humorous can work. Obviously, browsable books can work, which are very information heavy. Are there any other storytelling techniques that you see working well connecting kids with these science books?
I have a couple of examples,
Okay,
and
great.
I wish I had this magic, like, if you do just this one thing, but I honestly believe it comes back to mastering the basics of a great picture book. Those are the same storytelling techniques that spark inquiry. So the structure of a book is critical. So those interesting structures. So I recommend to teachers Seashells More Than a Home. Melissa Stewart imparts a lot of information. Yeah, it's a compare and contrast structure that uses similes and layered text. And it's great for in the classroom for discussing structure and function. Language is also key. And Giant Squid, Candace Fleming creates that sense of mystery at the beginning. The kids lean in, I want to know, what is this creature? So that's another one, engaging beginnings. Anytime in the first couple of pages of a book, you can go kaboom with the kids. That's going to get them interested and wondering, how did that happen? Why did that happen?
And that was The Day the River Caught Fire. That's Barry Wittenstein. Is that right?
It is.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
Thank
which he starts with, basically a river exploding, and then the
Yeah,
immediate kid question is why.
I And then I think the strategic page turns too in Animal Architects, Amy Cherrick's. She has a really good job of introducing a little bit about the animal. And then there's a page turn that gives the kids, would be great for predicting with teachers of, what's going to come next. And then Kids in a Scene, Coyote Moon by Maria
Jan
Jan.
Ferrari.
Thank you.
I love that book.
I do too, but it's incredibly engaging. And I think it gives kids an experience of following around a coyote that they couldn't do, in everyday life. It wouldn't be possible. And that helps them to formulate new questions.
Well, and you talked about this a little bit with Amy Cherrick's book about how we can use books to help kids make predictions about what happens next. Do you have other strategies for using books to model or encourage asking questions, making predictions, revising thinking in light of new information, kind of those core elements of scientific thinking?
Yeah. There are a couple of different types of books I love for that. One, as we talked about, is biographies. I encourage teachers to read aloud biographies because they model all of those science and engineering practices. One of my favorite types of books that I hope we're going to see more of are books that I call biography of a discovery.
Mm.
So Darcy Pattinson has her Moments in Science books. So I've got Eclipse and Erosion here. Similarly, Plight of the Pelican by Jessica Stremmer, but where they walk readers through that scientific process, it doesn't necessarily focus on a person, but a discovery. One of my favorite books that does this is The Wolves of Yellowstone by Catherine Barr.
Oh,
Number one, it's long. And I like that not every picture book has to be short. I love men or texts that show once in a while short isn't always where it's at. But it's beautifully written and it walks readers through the process of returning wolves to Yellowstone. This is how you know, of course, is a mentor text for encouraging scientific thinking. And what I really love about it is that while the text is spare, it says a lot about how science is done and it lets kids see themselves as scientists. Like you mentioned before, there is research behind that. There's a federal report called the Brilliance Report that shows that it's not enough for kids to get good grades in science. They have to see themselves doing the work of scientists. And I think your book does that so well.
that was a goal. That was an illustration note. I know we're told not to use illustration notes, but it was really important to
Yeah,
me that we show kids from all different backgrounds all around the world doing
that
science.
really
So,
shines through.
yeah.
And then I know we talked a lot about picture books, but I did want to throw in the middle grade space. Heather Montgomery is a master at modeling the process of science. So in Who Gives a Poop and Something Rotten, she takes readers on a journey of discovery. It's her journey of discovery, but it really it really models wonder and curiosity and all those practices.
Well, and we should say, I mean, there are a lot of fabulous STEM books for middle grade and young adult.
Mhm.
And also, if you only have little bite-sized chunks of time, you can use picture books in a middle school science classroom as a kickoff for a lesson or a way to wrap up a lesson.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is something that I advocate to middle school teachers a lot because even though they think they're older, cool kids, kids love being read to. Kids of all ages love being read to.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of great information in those books. So,
Mhm.
it's kind of like rapid fire round here, but if you could give children's nonfiction authors one piece of advice to keep in mind as they're working on those STEM books, what would it be?
Since my first book comes out in March and it's from a non-traditional publisher, so I feel like a newbie, I'm going to come at this question from more of a cheerleader perspective than a craft perspective. Because we know this business is hard. It takes a long time from idea to publication. It can be really discouraging. So, my piece of advice is to keep in mind that your work is impacting children for the rest of their lives. So, I just finished reading The Enchanted Hour by Megan Cox Gordon. And the book is all about the power of the read aloud and how much it impacts a child's future. And so, reading books to children gives them such an incredible start in life, and that advantage lasts throughout their years of schooling. So, I want authors to know that they are impacting the futures of countless children, as much as teachers and parents, because they can be found in the laps of kids, not just at school and at home, but on the bus, at the barber, in the doctor's office, waiting in a restaurant, riding in a car. Like our books can be a constant companion to kids and they can really change the course of their lives.
So, tell us the title of your book that's coming out in March.
It's called Dig In, and it's about vegetable farming, small scale vegetable farming. I had the pleasure of interviewing 12 farmers in Iowa. And we talk about how they problem solve and grow different things on their farms. And it comes up from the Iowa Ag Literacy Foundation,
Is it a picture book or a middle grade?
middle grade.
Very cool.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I will see if I can add it to our bookshop. I keep a bookshop for the podcast. So I'll see if it's available and if I can
Okay,
add it. Very
sounds
cool.
good.
And so finally, we have alluded a few times to the fact that you not only teach educators, but now you are also developing workshops for authors so that we can better connect with classrooms. So tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about some of the upcoming opportunities that you have for authors.
Sure. So I have a series of 5 webinars coming up that I've designed specifically for the Kidlit community. So in them, we're going to examine these essential elements of elementary science instruction so that authors can apply this learning to your manuscripts, your curriculum guides, your school visits. They are every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Central for the next 5 weeks. They begin September 30th. And I think the podcast is going to go live in
October 3rd.
October,
Yeah.
October 3rd. So, but they'll all be recorded and you can buy the replay. That first one is taking a deep dive into the science and engineering practices. There's one on essential elements for curriculum guides. There are some things that I feel strongly research shows you should have in your curriculum guide. One of my favorites that I put together is Science Talk Boot Camp, where we practice leading child-centered discussions and encouraging all children to participate. So I'm really excited about them. You can learn more by going to my website, starrmatica.com/kidlit science series.
Awesome. So it sounds like this will be beneficial not just for crafting books, but also developing curriculum guides. And then when we do school visits or library visits or story times and we're working with kids, then they will also be beneficial. So this is great.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Emily. It has been an absolute pleasure. You inspire me all the time. I appreciate all the knowledge that I've gained from you. And I'm so grateful that you were able to come on and share with so many more folks.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
If you'd like to learn more about Emily and Starrmatica and some of her upcoming learning opportunities, I'll link to her resources in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, and review Nonfiction Kidlit Craft Conversations wherever you listen or watch your podcasts. It helps others discover the show and join our community of nonfiction lovers and creators. Until next time, happy writing and revising.